government that we're working with? I mean, the strikes only being in Sirte?
Well, it's where they're fighting right now, and that's where the greatest concentration of.
But if there were strikes other places, could we do it?
There would be, yes. If we were asked by the Libyan government in the future, which may happen, to help them in other ways in other places, I'm sure we'd be willing to consider that very favorably. Because look, we're after them as well. Libyans don't like foreigners in their country, so Libya has its own problems. There's kind of a civil war going on there. But if we could get the people to stop fighting one another, Libyans, over who's going to run the place, they will turn against ISIL. They're not a bad partner to have.
Afghanistan. It seems that the Pentagon's ramping up things there. More airstrikes, more authority to strike the Taliban. Does this mean the strategy over the past year has not worked?
No, the strategy, and you know this very well, is to strengthen the Afghan security forces so that they can more and more do it themselves. This is the fighting season there. So we want them to make as much progress as fast as we can. That's why we asked the president for some additional authorities, which he granted. That's why we asked him to keep some additional forces there next year. But it's not that we're securing Afghanistan. The whole point is to get the Afghans to secure Afghanistan. But they're not ready to stand on their own 2 feet yet.
Last week, a company of Army Rangers, some 150 American troops, fought this fierce 3-day battle against ISIS-affiliated forces in eastern Afghanistan. They killed, according to the sources we had, hundreds of ISIS fighters, but there were 5 American troops shot. When you look at that, why is that not serious combat?
I just talked to 2 of them this morning. I just got off the phone
with
the 2 guys who were there with their families. I told them this, and this is kind of the answer to your question. First of all, I'm sorry that they got shot. We're going to take good care of them, but they ought to know how successful the mission was that they were part of. And this is important. This actually was a highly successful mission, destroying terrorists that had come over across the Pakistani border into that area. People shouldn't be in any doubt, Bret, that when we're doing this, our people are in harm's way. There's no more serious responsibility for me as Secretary of Defense, and that's why I called these guys, than taking care of people that we put at risk. But make no mistake, they're at risk, and they did something that was heroic, but also very successful there, and absolutely necessary for our national security.
I guess it's the semantics. Combat operations, major combat operations. I mean, if you talk to those guys, they were in 3 days of a pretty heavy battle.
I wouldn't get too hung up on the semantics. I think these guys are fighting. They're definitely in combat. That's how you get shot. Their purpose is counterterrorism. They were after a group of terrorists coming in there.
In Iraq, Mosul, you mentioned before. Will Mosul be recaptured by the time you step down?
I can't say that for sure, but I certainly hope so, and we are positioning forces to make that possible. Let me tell you how that's going to go. Right now, just as we speak right now, forces are moving up that we have trained. These are Iraqi army units supported by us in all ways with logistics, equipment, training, air power, advisors. They're moving north to 2 towns, Makmur and Kiara, that are on the southeast and the southwestern side of Mosul. Meanwhile, Kurdish Peshmerga units, also equipped, trained, and supported by the United States, are moving to the north. They will envelop Mosul and collapse ISIL's control. The precise timetable, we know what the timetable is, but those forces will come. We'll have to see what ISIL does and how hard they fight. One way or another, Mosul will be taken.
How many more troops can Americans at home expect to be going to Iraq?
Well, right now, there are about 3,500 U.S. forces there, and there are about 3,500 coalition forces. And their role is to enable tens of thousands of Iraqi army units, because that's the number we train and equip to take back their country. So I can't predict that. The only thing I can say is we are prepared to do more wherever we see an opportunity to accelerate this defeat. So if more is required, and I'm sure there will be additional authorities and additional capabilities that will be required, I'll let our commanders see opportunities to do that. I will go to the president with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as I have, and if he's done like he's done so far, he'll say, go for it, because we need to get this done quickly.
Iran, were you consulted in any aspect of this deal with the $400 million and getting it to Tehran?
It's not a Defense Department matter. It's been a State Department matter, so I can't add anything to what you've heard from the State Department or the White House.
So military didn't help in facilitating?
Well, we do things with respect to Iran, not this. There was a nuclear deal done with Iran, which was good in the sense that it took away, if it's implemented verifiably, which it is being so far, the nuclear weapons danger from Iran. But Iran is still involved in malign activity. It threatens its region. It threatens our neighbors. And that's one of the reasons why we have a big presence in that part of the world. ISIL is one reason, but deterring Iranian aggression, countering Iranian malign influence in the region is the other reason we have forces there.
But you haven't seen any change from Iran since the nuclear deal as far as giving money to terrorists, for thumbing its nose at the world with the ballistic missile tests, anything changing with Iran?
Well, I think they continue to do things that are dangerous. That's why we need to protect ourselves. That's why we need missile defense. That's why we need aircraft carriers and other ships in the Gulf. That's why we do all these things.
The Marines today are taking a 24-hour pause. It's a grounding, essentially, because they've had some planes that have had major problems. They've had a crash. One pilot was killed. Should Americans be worried about military aviation?
Well, you're talking about Marine Corps aviation readiness, which is an issue. It is the top priority for the Marine Corps, for the Commandant General Neller. For me, as Secretary of Defense, we've been making special investments in it. We do have issues associated with the way our budget has been treated over the last several years. You know, there's been gridlock in Washington. There's been sequestration. There's been threats of shutting down the government. And as Secretary of Defense and all our folks here in the Department of Defense, this kind of budget turbulence and this kind of budget uncertainty makes it very difficult for us to do what we have to do, which is provide the best and total and adequate protection for the country and spend the taxpayers' money as well. It's got to stop. And the only way for it to stop is people have to come together. Both parties, both houses of Congress, Congress, the administration, behind something that's sensible and that people can agree to, and not have this upsy-downsy, herky-jerky budgeting.
The president's meeting with you today. Your three predecessors told us in interviews that they had interesting dynamics with this White House. It was kind of hands-on. They felt a little restrained in their job here, and each of them had a different take on it.
It was the operational micromanagement that drove me nuts.
Too often, people are kind of worried or second-guessing where the president wants to go, and they try to then shade their views to basically please the president.
I don't think there's one veteran on his senior staff at the White House. I don't believe there's one business person. I don't believe there's one person who's ever run anything. I think he's got to fundamentally understand, and I'm not sure he ever did, nor the people around him, the tremendous responsibility the United States has.
Your assessment of working with this president and how this national security apparatus is set up in the Obama administration?
Well, I'd say two things. First of all, I never have any problem getting a hearing, nor does the chairman. We have private meetings with the president. Every time we've come to him and said, here is a way we can accelerate the defeat of ISIL, he said, go for it. Now, he's demanding. He wants it to be thought through, but we're good at that. The other thing I'd say is that, and this would be true of any president late in their second term, President Bush, President Clinton, after 7.5 years, President Obama knows a lot. So if you're talking about some little town in Syria, most Americans have never heard of it, and I don't want them to have to. But he has. So by this time, he's got a lot of experience under his belt. So those are the two things that stand out most. I always get a hearing, and by this time, he's pretty knowledgeable.
Mr. Secretary, thanks for the time today.
Thanks, Bret. Good to have you back here.
That's good.